Welcome to the Whole Farm Podcast, brought to you by Chonex, where we explore soil health, nutrient management, and the systems that help crops and farms perform better over time. Each episode features conversations with growers and industry experts focused on practical insights you can apply in the field. Whether you're managing nutrients, building healthier soils, or looking for data-driven ways to improve outcomes, this podcast is built to support real decisions and real results.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Whole Farm Podcast, sponsored by Chonex. I'm Les Riley. Our normal host, Michael Piscata, is out today. He had a conflict come up at the last minute, and so I'm going to get to do this with my friend and neighbor Sledge all by myself. So anyway, so Sledge and I have known each other a number of years. Actually knew his dad, and his farm is about an hour from ours. But he's been up in cattle farmer in both the hills and the Delta, and Sledge is doing some pretty interesting things with regenerative agriculture on his farm, even though he's been very successful in conventional farming. And I told Michael if I didn't think it would offend you, I'd say we could entitle this podcast "Teaching an Old Dog New Tricks," because I think you were really successful in the conventional ag world, and now you're starting to or been on a journey adopting regenerative practices and learning about them, and approaching things a little differently. So let's start by kind of telling your background. So you're third generation, at least, on your farm. Tell us a little bit about your farm, your family heritage in cotton and cattle and farming in Mississippi.
Well, thank you, Les. So I've kind of lost track, but it's been at least three generations and certainly more. Although farming has morphed from what it would have been 100 years ago or more. But the family's been here for about 150 years or better. We farm, as you said, we farm up in the hill area around Como, and then over kind of at the very eastern edge of the Delta near Pleasant Grove. And the land is very similar in both places. Most of the land we farm is a Collins silt loam soil that is very productive, but it also has some challenges. And this is I think my 53rd year to farm. I came in and farmed with my dad, and I guess really from the early stages of when I used to, I spent a lot of time with my dad when, I probably started when I was about 6, and just being on the farm. And one thing that was pretty evident, and I guess something he must have pointed out to me, was a lot of the erosion that we had. So my initial goal was to stop erosion. And of course, by doing that, some of the land we took out of production and put into pasture. Other land we put into hay, and then some eventually went into CRP. But then we continued to farm the rest of it, and my goal was to stop erosion. So we started doing no-till, and then although we had planted cover crops before, we'd kind of lost. I guess lost touch with the value of it, and probably about 15 years ago or more, we started planting cover crops again, and the combination of the two really is nice. So basically, I mean, we obviously we have to till a little bit every year in some fields, but for the most part, we're 100% no-till, and about 50% of the land we do and cover crops, and we also have pretty nice cattle operation. We've got good pasture land, and we have some timberland as well.
Currently, you're growing cotton, corn, and beans. You have grown peanuts as well as wheat. Any other crops that you've grown, or has it primarily been cotton and grain?
Mainly cotton and grain. We don't have any soybeans this year. We used to grow a lot of wheat. So the crops that we have planted, as you mentioned, would be cotton's always been a mainstay, and then corn, soybeans, peanuts, and wheat. I plant a little bit of sweet corn, and I plant a few purple hull peas, but that's mainly just for people within the community, and but I just kind of get our feet wet with that.
Right, and you have some irrigation and some dry land.
Right, and the our quest, for I guess into regenerative agriculture, which I guess back at one time we probably called it best conservation practices, was to improve the water holding
Right.
capacity of the land, because a lot of the land we just don't have irrigated. Some of it I can irrigate, but we probably all of it I could, or most of it I could irrigate, but it would be more expensive, and we've done pretty well, especially with the cotton on the dry land. But yeah, we have furrow irrigation, and we also have sprinkler irrigation in the Delta.
And you've been kind of on a you've been a conservationist as long as you've been farming, but you've been kind of on a regenerative soil health journey the last several years. Some of the changes you've made, or maybe things you've learned the last few years? As you've started doing cover crops and looking at biologicals, and you even went to Brazil this year and visited with some farmers that are making their own biologicals on the farm, correct?
That's correct. And I was seeing a lot of benefits, just visual observation, from the benefit of cover crop and the no-till. Partially, I think, because you don't get the splashing of the soil. You've got a lot of plant matter on the ground, and you don't get as much splashing of soil against the young seedlings. And I think that probably introduces some diseases into the young seedlings. But I really wanted to know why I was seeing what I was seeing, because I thought our no-till crops came up healthier. I know it's kind of counterintuitive to what some people think, but so I started saying, well, what's going on? And I really, just got on YouTube and started searching. Got on the internet and started searching, and I discovered about mycorrhizal fungi, and then I learned about your carbon nitrogen balance, your uh, fungi and bacteria balance, and it just kind of led me down a whole nother avenue, and it's really made it kind of fun because I've learned so much they never taught us back, certainly when I was coming along in school, and really I don't know that a lot of people are aware of it now. So it opens up a whole new avenue of what's going on, and I think it's certainly got a lot of potential, and I think we're going to make a lot more discoveries in the biological world here in the near future.
You what are some, or maybe one significant difference you've seen is in terms of either yield, maybe the health of your crop and your soil, uh, or your bottom line, your economic benefits of moving towards no-till and cover crops and kind of a biological approach to farming?
Well, there's certainly we don't put as many hours on our tractors any longer. We obviously we don't spend quite as much time in the field. We don't burn as much fuel. The water runs out of the fields much cleaner. I mean, and that's you're keeping some nutrients on the ground or in the soil. Uh, it's just a whole lot of benefits. So I do feel that we save money. Now, when we plant cover crops, that's a cost, and it's very hard to quantify all the savings. I really, I always caution people that I believe these, my concepts are right. I don't think, I know I'm prejudiced against, for some of the things that I'm doing, and I don't want to oversell anything, but we're saving money. We've actually seen our yields increase. We can usually go, we always laugh in this part of the country that, we may be just just had a flood rain, but in 2 weeks we'll be in a drought, and it's a lot of truth in that. 2 weeks after we're saturated, we pretty well need a rain again. And by doing the cover crops and the no-till, uh, I usually think we get at least another extra week before we see the similar stress. And quite often in that last week we'll get a rain. So it just we absorb more water, we store more water, we We don't evaporate as much water because your ground's cooler. So those are some of the benefits I've seen anyway.
Yeah, well, we've got I think you're doing some chonex on some actually some, I think some native trees and a few other things on your place, and you uh, do a lot of trials. There's a lot of trials going on all over on biologicals, and I was actually thinking this morning about one of the challenges is that um, biologicals changing the approach to your farm is a multi-year process. It's kind of rethinking the way you're doing things, and so sometimes you do a trial and think, well, if he doesn't see an immediate yield bump this year, the guy's going to say this doesn't work. And I thought it was interesting. You said, you believe in what you're doing. And, there's a real confirmation bias and that we all have. Gabe Brown said one time that um, to make small changes change the way you do things, but to make big changes change the way you see things. And I think, one of the things I've come to appreciate about you as we've, gotten to know each other and worked together on things is that you really see things differently and you continue to try to look at things differently. So I want to talk a little about regenerative agriculture and cotton in particular. But before we go to that, something you and I have talked about a lot offline that I think kind of rolls into that next question is the changes we've seen in rural America, the decline in number of farmers, rural population. I mean, your hometown of Como, anywhere you drive across the Mississippi Delta or West Tennessee or places like that, you see these dying and dead towns. Um, what I would say in your 53 years of farming, what has been the most shocking or the most disappointing change you've seen as far as the impact of, just kind of our whole approach and paradigm?
Well, I think if you look at our community, we've lost sight of the value of community. People would go to a bigger store. Maybe they would drive 30 miles to a bigger store that could offer uh, a gate a little cheaper or whatever. And so you just kind of extrapolate that into pretty much everything we do. The dollars have left this community. All of our dollars, uh, whether we buy from John Deere, those dollars go to whoever the stockholders are. Once, when we had more mules or just smaller farms, we had more labor, that those dollars stayed within the community. They spent the dollars in the community. So basically all of our dollars leave the community. And that's one thing that I saw when we visited Brazil. There was a soybean processing plant there, and they were using wood chips and sugarcane pulp in order to fuel the furnaces that heated the process, into making soybean oil and soybean meal. And partially it was out of necessity because there was no natural gas or anything close by. But partially, I think, because they try to use as much local products as they can. And I think that's what we've lost, whether it's our forest products, agriculture, whatever. It's really disappointing how we have just kind of handed the keys to our communities over to somebody else that doesn't care about our community.
Yeah, it's kind of an extractive economy. Rural America has somewhat become an economic colony, not only for the U.S. but for the rest of the world. And I appreciate some of our conversations about getting back to value add, getting back to local buying, and that kind of rolls into the next point that we want to talk to you about. So, am I correct that you serve on the National Cotton Council, or is it the Ginners Association?
Well, it was both. I have held leadership positions in both. I was chairman of the National Cotton Council in 2015, and I was chairman of the National Cotton Ginners Association in 2009. But so yeah, I've was able to travel some within the U.S. and overseas and representing the cotton industry.
Yeah, and that's an industry certainly that the consolidation and the offshoring of all the value adds and the value adds leaving the U.S., leaving our communities is really really had an impact. So, um, two questions. One, what do you think of the I mean, what do you know about the initiatives to bring regenerative ag and regenerative ag principles, particularly to apply to cotton? And then secondly, what changes do you think the cotton industry needs to make the next 5 to 10 years? If it's going to survive and still be a viable and thriving industry in this country.
Well, I'll answer the second question first. The there are a lot of initiatives going on now in order to the United States actually consumes more cotton than we grow. Uh, and so, but much of that cotton is processed overseas, which is understandable. But we're trying to bring some of that processing back to this country. We're trying to ensure that if cotton goods are sold in this country, that it is indeed uh, uh, U.S. cotton, U.S. grown cotton. And so, and there's a whole initiative now, I think, about plants instead of plastic. And basically, because synthetics, have the same base, synthetic fibers have the same base as plastic, which is oil. So I think there's a lot of things going on. And then when it comes to regenerative, cotton is unique in that every bale of cotton has a grade. Whether it's a whole lot of combination of factors, but you're the color of the cotton, the strength of the cotton, the thickness of the fiber, and maybe the trash content of the cotton. But every bale is unique and can be through several different processes can be tracked, and so that I can say that this is my cotton if it gets to a mill somewhere, and if they've bought my cotton, which is regenerative, and other growers' cotton, which is regenerative, we can prove that, or we'll be able to prove it. And that's a certain value. When I sell my soybeans or sell my corn, it's commingled with anybody else's, and I can't distinguish from it. I really think there's a lot of demand out there to support farmers that are growing cotton regeneratively. I think there's certainly a need, and people see the benefits that regenerative farmers are doing for the environment.
I think it's really helpful, and cotton can almost be a test case for how that can be done, in other industries, because as long as you're growing commodities, efficiency is going to be king and consolidation is going to be the ultimate end. But if we can move the market to where, you know, certain practices can be proven to not only produce more environmentally healthy and profitable farming, but a higher quality product, then we should expect the market and the consumers to pay for that, and I think they will. What is the name of the initiative that the cotton industry has that is focused on these sort of things? That it slips my mind right now.
Well, I think one of them is BACA, BACA, and gosh, I've just gone blank on what it stands for, but it's about I think offering a premium for U.S. to people that use U.S. grown cotton, and of course then there's the USDA, I think, has come out with the plant not plastic campaign as well. And I'm not sure if that's exactly what you had in mind, but I know
Yeah, yeah,
that's two of
yeah,
them.
yeah. I've just seen a lot of stuff, and isn't the Nolans over in Clarksdale and a few other folks working on some initiatives to work directly with the fashion industry and clothing manufacturers to kind of connect the dots. We've got farm to fork on the food side. There's an increasing interest in traceability on the cotton side as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. Uh, and Callie Nolan is doing a really good job of spearheading that for and getting in touch with brands and retailers and within the cotton industry and signing up growers to do this.
Right. Well, So I had a question that Michael wanted me to ask, and I'm going to kind of enhance it. He had asked what you thought the USDA could and should be doing to encourage these sort of practices. They put out the regenerative initiative like $700 million last year, and you know a lot of times those NRCS programs, they're great ideas, but in the application, it kind of gets lost in the translation. So he wanted to know both in terms of cotton and regenerative farming, what you thought USDA could be doing. But I would add to that and say, what should farmers and people on the production and processing side of agriculture be doing in your mind to encourage a different type of ag?
Well, that's a good question. There's one initiative out there called RIPE, RIPE, and but this initiative is encouraging USDA to give just a set fee per acre for cover crops, and it would be enough of a fee to where it would more than cover the cost, and it would really be an incentive to grow cover crops. Now, obviously, there's not enough money to cover all these programs, but not everybody's going to take advantage of it. So, I think I think probably cover crops, just from my experience, for the dollar spent, are probably do as much to improve soil health and water quality as anything out there. Uh, it is a learning curve how to manage them, et cetera, et cetera. But we all learn new things, and if I can learn these things at an older age, anybody can can learn them. But so I just think we need to continue the focus on conservation, on regenerative ag, and basically these things cost money. There's a fear factor of change. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years for people, or longer, for people to get enough experience for it. So the incentive has to be there to induce change and mindsets. And I have been asked, a lot of times, what's the biggest reason people don't adopt cover crops, and they list a number of things. And I say usually it's our mindset. If we want to do it, we'll do it.
Right.
And so the whole key is to just encourage people to try it.
Yeah, yeah. I think the cost and fear factor is certainly a problem because I saw a quote the other day. I think it was on LinkedIn, but I'm not certain. But the guy said, um, we all have to decide if we want to take risk. But he said, if you don't take a risk, that in and of itself is a risk. So, there's not like a risk-free way to farm or be in business or really go through life. And you just have to choose your risk. And, I think the question is the risk of continuing on the way we are, is that worth it, or is looking at things differently? Before we go, let's talk a little bit more about specifics on cover crops, and some things you've learned, some things you tried. Because when you mentioned the program to pay for cover crops, they've done a little bit of that through Equip, and one of the things I've noticed is um, there's two kind of people planting cover crops under those programs, and regrettably, the latter is the majority of them that I've seen. Uh, some people are actually interested in them and are been either dabbling or considering cover crops, and when they find out there's a way to kind of offset some of the costs, they jump in and try it and try to learn it. And I want to, here's the things I'm doing cover crops for. I want to build my soil, or control erosion, or fix nitrogen or scavenge nutrients, whatever their goals are. And they start playing with it. But then there's the other side, which is, okay, the government will pay me X dollars per acre to plant a cover crop. Well, what's the minimum cost I can get in cover crop seed and qualify for that and get that payment? And then I've actually seen guys on the back end, there'll be like a cutoff date. You cannot terminate the cover crop before this date. And whatever that date is, they're out there spraying a burn down, and they got their tillage equipment in the field, and it's almost defeating the purpose altogether, and it's just a a little money pass through. So, um, on in your specific experience, what mixes are you using on what crops? You know, what works, what doesn't? Are you flying it on before harvest? Are you drilling it? Tell me a little bit about your specific practices on covers.
Well, there's a three-way mix that I use. It's kind of our go-to mix, but you can play with other things as well. But uh, we use cereal rye, we use the tillage radish, and I use the winter peas. So you've got three different. You've got a grass, you got a brassicas, you've got a legume. Uh, if I'm going to plant corn the following year, I'll maybe leave out. I'll probably leave out the cereal rye because there can be a little bit of a interaction between the rye and the corn when it's young. Uh, but yeah, that's our go-to. But I have used carinata, I've used rape, I've used turnips, I've used of course wheat in the mix. I've used some vetch. Uh, it just kind of depends on the person. But I do prefer a three-way mix because there's a lot of proof to show that the three different species, then you get three different types of mycorrhizal fungi, and they kind of support each other. I mean, you get really off into the biology there. And I forget exactly where else we were going with it, but what was the other part to your question?
Well, no, I just wanted to know some of the specifics. And you're not currently rolling or crimping. You're terminating with a burn down and planting through it. Do you plant green or do you plant after you burn it down?
We burn it down. I keep saying I'm going to plant green, but that's just a whole nother, especially when we plant cotton and we seed cotton fairly shallow.
Right.
Uh, it adds a lot of complexity to it, and I keep saying I'm going to do it, and I haven't done it yet. And I don't like to plant my cover crop too terribly thick. I mean, you want enough cover crop. Your wheat or your rye will tiller out. It'll expand. So we usually plant about 35 pounds of cereal rye and about pound and a half, 2 pounds of tillage radish and about 10 pounds of the peas. And sometimes I'll toss in a few black oats with that or whatever. But I've gotten real good luck, except probably for last year was the worst luck I've had using an airplane. And because it was so dry, we were able to get through harvesting early. So then we ended up planting at no-till the rest of the cover crop. So
Did you well that kind of leads into the thought about are there any, at least on your farm in particular, that you tried and would stay away from, or you know I think sometimes guys that are considering this, they try it on one spot, they have a bad outcome in some area, whether it's slugs or couldn't get it burned down good, slow emergence or whatever their reason was, and they say, well, that didn't work for me. What is maybe a negative experience you've had with covers and what you learned from it?
well, I know the rape or canola, something like that. It's pretty hard to terminate, and so it wasn't a problem with us because I didn't have a real thick stand of it. But there's a few things like that that are tough to terminate. The radish where we're in North Mississippi. The tillage radish usually freezes out in January, early February. The freeze will kill it, and it's probably 98% of it'll die during the winter, so it's not a problem. And then the rye and the winter peas are easy to terminate. And I have planned, I usually let the rye begin to head out. It's kind of in the boot stage or so when we'll terminate it. And the other advantage to it is about terminating is anything that turns, like your planter press wheels, your gauge wheels, your row cleaners. That dry material will pass through it; it'll shed through it, but that green material tends to kind of rope rope up and twist like a rope,
Right.
and that can give you a problem.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, that's really helpful.
And then just one other thing is I like to fly a cover crop in on our corn. Typically for us, about the last week in August, first week in September before we harvest. Same
Right.
thing with cotton. We'll do it 2-3 weeks later, in September on cotton. So you get a lot more biomass by doing it early than waiting until after harvest to plant.
Yeah. And I think one thing that you're essentially talking about that I think is the real key to incorporating covers is you don't treat covers like a stepchild that the end of the season you just kind of sling it out there and you leave it and forget about it. You need to take growing covers as serious as you do growing a crop. You need to farm that cover, plant it properly, et cetera. And I think that helps a lot. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Well, I guess to go back to your question about the two types of people planting cover crops, it all depends on what you want. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that I maybe in the past I have cut corner a little bit, and it always comes around to where it bites me
Mhm.
in the end. And so it depends on what you want. If you're just trying to get by, okay. But if you're actually trying to build something, build a future, do it right the first time. So that's what I would say about cover crops. If you really don't plan on doing it right, just don't do it. I mean, but if you're going to do it right.
All right. Well, very good. Well, we appreciate your time, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you offline soon. I know we've got a couple of things in the works that I look forward to getting an update on, and maybe sharing the update with everybody else later. Well, thank you so much for being on, Sledge. Again, this was the Whole Farm podcast, sponsored by Chonex. I'm Les Riley, and we'll see you next time. And I believe Mike will be with us then.
Great. Thanks, Les. I always enjoy the opportunity to talk about cover crops and no-till.
Thank you. Have a good
Right.
day.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Farm podcast by Chonex. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone in your network. For resources or to learn more about Chonex, visit chonex.ag. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.